for holding this important hearing today. In the 4+ months that I've held office, one of the top issues to repeatedly arise in many of my meetings with constituents in Georgia's 9th Congressional District is the high cost of prescription drugs, many of which are life-saving medicines. This is an issue that I think most all of us sitting on the committee have the desire to address. I strongly believe that we should be working to ensure patients have more choices when it comes to accessing life-saving medications. However, in achieving this goal, we must be very wary of any effort that looks to stifle innovation or to set prices, such as in the Democrats' proposed bill, H.R. 3, as the solution it puts forward would be detrimental to the efforts to lower costs and increase choices. Not only would the woes of H.R. 3 be felt by the big manufacturers, but I believe they'd be felt by the small businesses and startups as well. And I'm reasonably confident that would be the end result, because as a small businessman by trade, I fully understand how stifling it is to be strong-armed by federal bureaucrats. So I'm determined to look for solutions that work, not only to bring transparency to the convoluted drug pricing space, but also to lower costs and to increase choices for patients. So I've got a couple of questions here. My first question is for Mr. Gonzalez. Is AbbVie engaged in any early stage partnerships with smaller biotech companies? And I'm not looking for names or anything like that of the companies. And if you are, can you please elaborate a bit on how government price setting, like what we see in H.R. 3, how government price setting might impact your investments in those companies and those partnerships, sir?
Well, we invest significantly in small biotech companies in partnership arrangements or other kinds of co-licensing arrangements. I think the fundamental issue with something like price controls is it would take the riskiest areas and it would make you much more hesitant to invest in those areas. But yet those are the areas that have the greatest opportunity to improve society. Areas like new treatments for Alzheimer's or treatments for Parkinson's disease or better treatments for some of the solid tumors and cancer that we haven't been able to make significant improvements. And so the trade-off you're going to make is you're going to take these very high-risk areas and you're not going to invest as aggressively in there because your risk is so high that you can't get the return going forward. I think that's the significant trade-off that we're going to have to deal with if we were to implement that kind of an approach.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And my next question is for Mr. Garthwaite. In your submitted testimony, you discuss the importance of, and I quote, inefficient value-destroying policies. Would you consider the Biden administration's push to waive IP protections from COVID vaccines as a value-destroying policy? And if yes, could you elaborate a little bit, please?
I have really strong concerns about waiving IP, and particularly waiving IP when we believe that products generate so much value that we need to make them more accessible to the world. I think we need to find ways to increase manufacturing capacity, and I think we need to find ways to get vaccines to the rest of the world. And I think right now, the incentives of Pfizer or Moderna, given their ability to sell this vaccine to the world, are aligned well to try and increase that manufacturing capacity. The thing I worry about is not the current pandemic. I worry about the next pandemic. And in particular, I worry about one that's going to require perhaps a small molecule treatment or a therapeutic as opposed to a vaccine, where firms are going to be very hesitant to make the investments to jump in to those markets, if what's going to ultimately happen is that they're going to have the intellectual property that they create transferred to other parties. And so I really believe that instead of waiving IP, the United States government can increase the incentives to develop or to bring vaccines to the rest of the world by either transferring vaccines that we currently have in storage or committing to pay high prices, even for vaccines done throughout the developing world, coming from the United States. It would be in our financial interest to pay for such vaccines.
Okay, thank you very much. I like that response. Yeah, I think it's very dangerous that we would open the door to allowing China to not only steal years of knowledge and investments that these companies have made in mRNA technologies and production capabilities, but then to turn around and effectively assist them to profit off of it too. With this concern in mind, and to add to what my good friend Congressman Heise said about earlier about waiving IP protections, I've added my name to a letter led by my good friend and fellow colleague from Georgia, Congressman Buddy Carter, that expresses how waiving such IP protections is dangerous and not an efficient means to achieving the White House's goal of getting vaccines to those around the globe in a timely manner. As expressed in the letter, I think that focusing on the transportation chain would better achieve the objective and simultaneously preserve U.S. companies' intellectual property rights. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.